he needs no introduction, the first public advocate, Mark Green. How about that?
Thank you. Can I use this?
Yes, you can use the podium, absolutely.
Well, you know, I came here intending to speak for and support Daniel Squadron, but now that there's a Green for public advocate and a Squadron, I'm going to stick with my original choice. I am honored to be both an early supporter of and now a surrogate for Daniel Squadron. 2 points of history. One is the Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz Center. I never knew Malcolm X like you. I read about him. But I knew Betty. And she and her children endorsed me when I ran for public advocate. I understood the historical nature of that, and I was in some awe and was very remorseful and upset at what eventually happened to the family and Betty. But it reminds me also of the history of the Public Advocate Office. It's often written about now by dumb columnists. Oh, it's a powerless office. They got that wrong. It's a very powerful office with a small budget. That part is true. A predecessor was the city council president, Andy Stein, you may recall, and he had a staff of 65. I held that office, renamed the public advocate, had a staff of 45. Betsy Gottbaum's successor, 35. Bill de Blasio, 28. However, think small tugboat can push a big supertanker if it uses its engines, its leverage, its guile, and it knows where it's headed. So this office has huge potential power under the city charter and will vary, frankly, based on the person holding it. It can be ineffectual or effective based on your view of the person holding it and based on their skills and history. So this often disparaged small office came up with 311, and Bloomberg's acknowledged it, and did it. Right now there's a 6-to-1 match. Small contributions are multiplied 6-to-1. The public advocate came up with the idea of small matching funds. It was 4-to-1, good, now it's increased 6-to-1. Police racial profiling, in the 90s, it took on Giuliani and exposed how he didn't punish bad cops with substantiated complaints against them. So this office, if it has the right occupant, has the right powers. I was the first public advocate. I didn't endorse in a race involving either of my successors, but I felt compelled to do so in this campaign. Why? First, the why goes to me. I care about this office. I'm never running again. That's not so much a threat as a fact. I have a wife, 35 years. That's how long we've been married. That's not her age. 35 years, and I want to keep her. But second, Daniel Squadron is the class of the field. These are other talented, capable, high-minded people are running, but I endorsed him early because of his quality and his effectiveness. So, in his district was Brooklyn Bridge Park. If you've seen it on the FDR, you've been there. My 2 children live, as all people under 40 are required to do by zoning, they live in Brooklyn Heights and Fort Greene. And I've been to the park. It was going forward in a not perfect way when Daniel stopped it, forced the developers to renegotiate and reconceptualize it, and now it's the park it is. Second, he co-wrote the SAFE Act, which Governor Cuomo got through our state legislature, and it's one of the best state laws in the country. consistent with the Constitution, but keeping guns out of the hands of maniacs and murderers to the extent that bad Southern laws allow. Third, Sandy was a once-in-a-century event. Let's say everybody was surprised, but a City Hall game playing that should not have been surprised that flooding would immobilize Lower East Side public housing where there are older people on higher floors. I live downtown, not in public housing, and you know, I was shocked when I saw water lapping up Avenue C and overwhelming the streets. And you're an older person not being able to leave your apartment without bathrooms working, with food dwindling. It is a calamity. He brought it to the attention of City Hall, which had a lot of priorities, and prioritized NYCHA housing in his district because he blew the whistle to people who respected him. And finally, there's an issue that I've always cared about personally, is campaign finance reform. I happen to think that big special interests and multi-billionaires shouldn't spend their own money to buy an office. Don't know why I think that, but it's something that has occurred to me over the years. And I'm a student of it and a participant in it. And it's a national issue, it's a Supreme Court issue. But Daniel was a leader of it in Albany, pushing for, okay, Citizens United says that wealthy people can spend their own money. That will change in our lifetimes. But until and when that happens, he wanted shareholder resolutions to be able to force disclosure. So if a big company, it's happening right now, the Koch brothers are starting to spend big money to elect Joe Lhota to mayor. The Koch brothers are not themselves running, obviously, but if they're worth $50 billion, two Bloombergs. If they decided to spend $25 million, think about it. Daniel Squadron has said no. Conclusion is, I've rarely seen someone who combines effectiveness, as proven by his short Senate career, with intelligence and integrity. I'm honored they had me come. I wasn't their first choice, but when State Senator Carl Kruger could not leave jail to come here from Brooklyn, they figured Mark Green is the closest thing to Carl Kruger that exists. Daniel's grandparents came through Ellis Island, working people who made a life for their family, ditto mine. Please consider Daniel next week when you vote for the fourth public advocate, because the first two public advocates, Betsy Gotbaum and I, strongly have endorsed him. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Actually, since the senator is not here, maybe I can pose a question to you on his behalf. There was an opportunity for the candidates to present each other with a question. And former City Councilwoman Tish James, who was here not too long ago, proposed this particular question for Mr. Squadron, and maybe you can answer it or do the best that you can. I don't know if you can, but we'll see. An important library in downtown Brooklyn Heights, which is in the senator's district, is being sold to a developer. And Mr. Squadron has not taken an opposing side on the sale or plans to significantly shrink the library. He has expressed concerns, however, that the library be adequately sized. He has also taken money from the NYPL Chief Operating Officer, David Offensend, the architect of such library sales and shrinkages and offhand public assets to developers like the Donna Library and the so-called Central Library Plan. What are your thoughts on anything that I just said with respect to the question that the councilwoman had for the senator? And you can take this microphone here.
First, I've written or edited 22 books. I love books. I love libraries. It's a measure of our civilization. And so if there's a question about whether libraries should stay open 3, 5, or 7 days, day and night, personally, I'd like to figure out a way that the city budget, which I have no influence in, maintains that. And this is a learning center as well, where we are. Second, Someone gave to Daniel who has an interest, and he's raised $1.5 million, and he's gotten another $1.5 million in matching funds. And so the game of people who cannot self-finance, whether it's Tish James or Rashma Sujani or Kathy Guerrero or Daniel Squadron or any of the mayoral candidates, that if among their several thousand contributors is someone who gave them $100, $1,000, and has an interest, then to imply they've been bought by a particular interest is frankly unfair. I've had 10,000 people in a campaign, and you don't always know. Now, if you have a couple of people who are running an outside independent expenditure and spending $1 million for you, and they don't coordinate with you, which is the law, it does look sleazy, and it might be sleazy because after you perhaps win and you get a call from Mr. X, who's just run $1 million campaign for you or against your opponent, guess whose phone call you take? So it's situational, and it depends on how much. And the integrity, ultimately, in a system, I think we should have 100% public funding and, based on signatures to qualify candidates. But in a system like this, you have to rely on, ultimately, public matching funds, which we have, and the integrity of the candidate. So until and when the state senator speaks about this possible sale or the actual sale, if it's a private sector space and it's sold, a public official really doesn't have much to say about it, but the longer libraries can be open, the better, and I'm sure he agrees with that.
All right, well, let's talk about the contribution in itself. I would have accepted your answer if it was like Joe Q, the public, just saying, well, anyone gives money, yada, yada. But you're a veteran of politics. You ran for citywide office. If you, as a candidate for office, accept a donation, I don't care if it's $10 or $100,000, from someone who has an interest and a stake in the selling of libraries and is a supporter of the central library plan, the assumption that most people who are reasonable would make is that that individual supports your campaign and there's some kind of implied interest there. So the senator, to your knowledge, the senator hasn't given back the donation. And so one would assume that since he accepted the donation, he knows that the donation came in, so he must support the Central Library Plan and what this individual stands for.
That is a leap of illogic. There is no implication.
It's leap of logic to assume
when
that
when you have thousands of contributors and no one controls your, if you have a budget of $10 million and the oil and gas interests are responsible for $8 million of $10 million, then in that situation, I think your surmise would be correct. But when you have public funding, the whole point, I drafted the 4-to-1 matching funds thing. I've run under the system 7 times. The great thing is when someone calls and says, hey, Mark, I really, I want to bulldoze the Exxon Shabazz Center to have a porno shop. And here's $4,900. I go, you got the wrong guy. Because I know I don't need that it's not $100,000.
Well, I didn't say it was. I said I didn't care if it was the $100
so you can
or
hypothesize,
$100,000.
You can hypothesize all you want.
Well, it's a fact that he gave a contribution.
If candidates are not equipped to X-ray and research, everybody giving a big contribution and what their interests are.
Oh, no, but this is a pretty important contribution, has been made public a number of times.
I'll speak for myself. When I ran, I wanted money to win. I was running against Mike Bloomberg, so it's not complicated. I would take any contribution except if a person had been charged or convicted of a crime. I don't mean jaywalking, but charged with a crime, take your money. I don't want it. Or a tobacco interest. Why tobacco? 3,000 kids a day in New York take up a habit that kills them, and the industry tries to addict them, knowing the result.
So
If-
I
if
made
I
the
can for one
judgment.
second, only because we're here to talk about libraries and the senator's plan to them. And I respect your resume and the role that you
forget
took.
me. You said, isn't the implication, I'm just saying,
No, 'cause
almost
you
every
started talking about
candidate
other things.
has their standards. If you want a candidate who won't take any money from anyone with a matter before the city council, that's fair.
Well, no, I wouldn't. My only point is, if I was a supporter of a particular plan, then it makes sense to accept donations from the chief architect of that plan. If I am not a supporter of that plan, it wouldn't make sense for me, whether it was $1 or $100, to accept a donation from a chief architect of a plan that I
Have you ever
opposed.
run for office?
I have, and I was elected, and I won, served 5 years, and I'm very proud of my record.
How many
And-
donations did you return? I don't know.
I didn't return any donations.
So you did agree with everybody who gave you money.
If it was a plan that I opposed and I got a donation that was brought to my attention from someone who supported that plan in a chief architect way, I would have happily given that money back. But that's not the case in this situation, because the senator knows that that donation was made. He has not given the money back, so one can make a logical assumption, and I don't think it's illogical to assume, that you support the candidate and his plans for giving you the donation that he gave.
I remember when David Duke, the racist,
Well, I don't want to talk about David Duke.
endorsed, you don't want to endorsed George W. Bush for president. Some anti-Bush people said, you see, Bush is a racist. He may have been. You don't reject money or votes unless you say beforehand, tobacco and convicted. If you want to investigate every donation, that's okay.
Well, it has been investigated. So let's talk about the Central Library Plan. Does the senator support it in its entirety?
I do not know.
Well, can we get him on the phone? That's a very important question, because this is a forum on public libraries, and the Central Library Plan is central to that forum.
That I don't know should not prejudice you for or against.
Well, no,
anything.
it would make more sense if we knew what his position was on the Central Library Plan, because then the donation would make sense.
He absolutely should let you know what his plans are on the library. And Josh, who's with me, will find out. But
Josh, can you get him on the phone?
He's actually at the event right now. He sends his apology.
that's why.
Can we text someone who's with him to get his position, yes or no, on the Central Library Plan?
I think that.
No, wait a second. No, wait, calm down. Is it possible? Do you know what his position is on the Central Library Plan?
This was like a forum for candidates for public advocate and their surrogates to talk about their issues, not to be accosted.
Oh, no, this is an actual issue. The Central Library Plan, as it relates to this public library forum, is very essential, actually, to what his position is. No, wait a second. I just want to get a quick commitment from you. Is it possible for you to text someone who's with him, yes or no, on the Central Library Plan? Can you do that now? Can you text someone who's with him now? Is that possible? All right, so the answer is no. Thank you very much, sir, for your answer. So I think that's something that we would love to know, and I'm sure that the citizens defending libraries will follow up with the senator, because that particular donation from the chief architect and the head of the NYPL is very crucial to the donation and the senator's position on the Central Library
Do you think the
Plan.
donation controlled him corruptly?
Well, I am not running for public advocate.
I
and
know.
so
I'm asking you the implication. Of your question.
I'm
Do
not
you think
implying
that
that
donation,
I'm not
how much
implying that
was it?
anyone is
How
corrupt. I
much
think
was it?
corrupt is the wrong.
No, you asked the question.
Using the word corrupt, I think, is a bit strong. I didn't imply that anyone is a corrupt here.
You implied
I
that
implied that
the
a
money,
donation could be misconstrued or construed as a support for a particular plan.
Well, let's ask
now
the
we don't
senator.
know what his answer is, because the senator isn't here and his surrogate doesn't know, and the person who is representing him on his campaign doesn't know, and either is not willing to call or text someone who's with him and ask him what his position is.
I want to apologize that he sent as a surrogate the first public advocate who happens not to know
Well,
this
no,
current answer.
we're not faulting you or him, quite frankly. We just want an answer.
Fine.
So if his staffer here can communicate with someone, if he can, that's great. And if he doesn't want to, then that's fine. I'm sure he's in a position to if he really wanted to. But we will follow up with his campaign and get an answer. We have some questions, if you would be so kind to answer them from, let's start with Jacob Morris and then Michael and Henry Adams. Jacob, go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to have you here. representing Daniel Squadron and also as the first public advocate, someone who I admire in regards to how you utilize the office of public advocate. And actually, I was discussing that with Roy last night in regards to some of the issues that might be explored today. This forum is about the libraries.
And Jacob, do you have a question?
So, so I was thinking about, given the limited budget of the public advocate, what could the public advocate do in regards to the problem and massive initiative that the Central Library Plan represents for the communities of New York City and the influence of the library. So, for example, and you're very well versed on this, as versed as anybody, and I know that for a fact. So I'd like you to speak for yourself, because no matter what Squadron at this point in time, whatever his position is or is not regarding the Central Library Plan, I would see that you and your insights would be very influential in regards to Daniel Squadron and his evolving position. So let me get very specific. $150 million in capital monies were released in June of 2012 by the City Council without a hearing. In March of 2012, I asked the Committee on Cultural Affairs, Van Bramer was the chair, specifically about whether or not they would do a study on the trade-offs and the economic impact of the Central Library Plan and spending all of that money on 42nd Street in contrast to spending it on the capital, the $800 million in capital needs of the 87 branches of the New York Public Library system in the 3 boroughs. What do you think about one of the greatest things that the Public Advocate's Office does?
You have to wrap it up, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm going to answer the question that you did ask without me knowing the senator's exact position, so I'm not going to fool you. The public advocate and borough presidents, city council president, used to have a vote on the Board of Estimate. And mayors then had to go to people who had a vote because the Board of Estimate could vote down a mayor, like theoretically. A Congress could vote down a president on the pending Syrian issue, theoretically. That was declared unconstitutional because it violated one person, one vote. So the public advocate and borough president no longer have that leverage. So what could a public advocate do? Because this mayor and any mayor does not ask the public advocate for permission on the capital budget. That's the reality. But if a public advocate has done a study of why it's a good investment, is not nothing. The word study may not impress you, but studies have changed the world. So lacking the leverage of a Board of Estimate, a public advocate could put down on paper your speech on the capital budget and the consequence. Beyond that, when people ask any of the candidates, what are you going to do about retroactive pay increases or the library plan, a truthful candidate would say, well, I don't control that. However, here's my position, and I hope that this or the next mayor thinks that I have a very good argument. Now, there are times the public advocate can be in control. It's when you file a lawsuit and you win, or you propose a bill and you get a veto-proof majorities, supermajorities in the city council. But beyond that, Daniel Squadron would have special influence because he comes from Brooklyn. He lives in Brooklyn, represents Brooklyn and Manhattan. Now, I know you have a good argument in your mind, you know, why the money should be here or there, but Martha was reaching for the microphone as well as me. And so I'll turn it back, because I'm not the candidate, to the moderator.
No, thank you. In light of the fact that the candidate is not here and some of the key issues we don't know his positions on, is there any other questions I would defer to the audience? Yeah. Thank you.
After your strong endorsement, I would like to know your position on the plan of Mid-Manhattan Library.
I don't know enough to say. And I hope that doesn't prejudice your view of Daniel, that I don't know enough to say when I'm not in the race or in citywide office or in local office. Maybe as a comment on me, but not on Daniel. And when he realized with a week to go on the eve of the Jewish holidays that he couldn't be in all the places that wanted him, they asked, would I, as a former public, speak for him generally at 2 events today, this being one. So I apologize that I don't, and I'm not just going to say one thing or another, because I know I don't know enough.
Well, that's really the question that I have to ask, because you asked us not to be prejudiced against Mr. Squadron, but one presumes that in asking you to do this, that he also forwarded to you this list of questions that this particular sponsoring entity, which is concerned about libraries, has. And so I think it is, at least, no matter how laudatory the surrogate, that it's really a kind of insulting to the people sponsoring the forum that you would not be here prepared to present his position on public libraries.
Okay.
Because otherwise, what's the point?
I accept responsibility.
And moreover,
Aha.
if then there is some evidence that he has some financial connection to people who oppose the position that we have in terms of being advocates for libraries and a plan which we think is going to destroy our major research library here in New York, and he's got a connection to those people, I think that it is reasonable for us to have some prejudice against Mr. Squadron on 2 counts.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to end on these 2 counts because I have another forum to go to. First, I accept blame that I'm not up to speed on this, not Daniel. And you said you should presume 2 things. One, it's an insult that I don't know more. Mea culpa, because this morning I'm refinancing, and my daughter had it, and they sent me material on it, but I knew I didn't have enough of a grounding to make believe that I had the answer. So if you're insulted, you should be insulted by me, not him. And I apologize for that. Second, to presume that somebody gave some money out of a several $million budget, when someone donates, someone gives you money or votes for you, they're voting for you, you're not voting for them. If the latter were true, then the moderator and every candidate would have to research every donation. And I gave back a few when they were publicly indicted. You never did, which doesn't mean anything. I mean, maybe all your donors were good. Do not hang a donor's money purely around the neck of any candidate unless you know they met, it was a lot of money, and they gave an obligation. Daniel Squadron may agree or not with you, and I see how your heads are shaking, but don't impute the views of any donor to him or any of the candidates. That is unfair. In fact, when Tish James was asked in the last debate, 2 debates, did any developers give you money before you voted on some development issues? I said to myself, oh, is that unfair? Of course developers gave her money. They give almost everybody money, and it's wrong to imply that she's bad because some developers, maybe this person, did so. I'd be careful about that.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, Martin. It was a real pleasure. As I stated, I'm sure the Citizens Defending Libraries will follow up with the Squadron campaign on what his position is. And we have a couple of days going until the election. You know, we never know. If Squadron, the senator, is not in line with the position of the person who gave money, then maybe he'll give it back. Who knows?